Welcome, Rachel, to the Thank Goddess podcast. I'm so grateful to have you here. We have so much to talk about today. But before we dive right into understanding a bit more about healing with horses, which you're going to explain, I'd love to know your story, your background, how you got to where you are today. What do you do? How do you help people? Yeah, I just want to learn a bit more about you.
It's really interesting, that question, because I was listening to your intro on your podcast, your first episode this morning, and it's just like, oh, I know that journey. Like I resonated with so much of spending a lot of years of my life in the masculine and being a strong woman, and didn't accept help, and I didn't change my name when I got married, and then after I have two children, they're in their 20s now. Somewhere from about 35, I started to really dive into the feminine, and have been on that journey really ever since, of just really balancing the masculine and feminine, not going too far the other way. So I certainly have. I've done that a lot, and I've got to say, I'm so excited that with this changing energy, women are doing it so much younger, and you're a great model of that. Just having these conversations, the words you're using, it's like, this is really cool. This is the evolution,
Thank you.
that's happening on the planet. So that's cool. So yes, I'm a mother. I started very corporate in my working life, in travel and in functions and hospitality. And then when I had my children, they got quite sick quite early on with things that we couldn't get to the bottom of. And that, in hindsight, was the biggest blessing of my life, because that put me on a trajectory of non-mainstream. There was no answers. I wasn't getting anywhere. So I had to start diving into different therapies, different approaches, different naturopaths, all sorts of healing modalities. And that began my toolbox creation of just gathering information, and for myself and for my family. And then I came across doula work many years ago. It's probably nearly 20 years ago. And it was just like such an ancient soul recognition that this is my world. So I dived so deep into the feminine and made a business called Birth by Nature for 10 years, serving women and families in the doula role. And that toolbox that I had created, I realized, everything I put my body through, the healing for myself, my family, I had great resources to say, hey, you might like this. Or I gathered great books so I could hand books to people so that they could do it for themselves and not have to have someone say, try it this way, but you might like this, or you might like this. And so essentially now what I feel is I have this eternal toolbox that's always growing. And when I sit with people, that's what we're working with. We're just assisting them to find, to gather, to have the tools to navigate this thing called life, because we're all just doing this journey together. So that is the underpinning of my work, is resourcing people, helping them connect deeper to themselves, and really cultivating that empowerment, self-love, everything that I've been on my quest for in life. So and I've brought by all that healing work and passion over the years. My other passion was horses, but I just loved them from my heart. I didn't understand their capacity of anything, of their potential. It was just a heart. I was just horse crazy. No one in my family had horses. I didn't have any.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was just this child that was horse mad, which, like so many girls are,
I was one of them. The
Saddle
Club.
Yes, they call us. They really call us. And I was so lucky that at 9, my dad knew someone and they had this kind of ex-racehorse that they weren't using. So he turned up one day for it wasn't my birthday, he turned up with an ex-racehorse as this 9-year-old that had no experience. We didn't know anything about horses. So I was lucky a dream came true that I got to learn, and I had to do everything at that age. Organise the farrier, call a vet. Mum and dad knew absolutely nothing. But that was a soul passion that really only came back to me when my daughter was 9 and got into horses, and then I picked it up. I picked it up again and was like, oh my gosh. But I still didn't know the healing capacity that's just come in the last 10 years of learning more of their capabilities. I knew that they made us feel amazing, being in their presence, and they expand our hearts. But I didn't know how much that they have to offer us as humans. And they're, some of my biggest teachers on earth have been horses. And I will talk at some point about my horse called Boomer. He was a master. He passed Easter last year. And he is one of my biggest teachers on earth. I've learned so much from him, and he's still very present in my life. I was tuning in with him before we started, just calling in his wisdom and his grace to assist, because he does. He taught me so much about life, death, the veil, the other side, eternal spirit. That's a big story in itself, but yeah, he's a very present energy that still walks earth with me, even though he's passed.
That is so beautiful. And I totally understand when you say, they're our greatest teachers. Something I always say, and not just horses, but just any animals. I see them as these beings with such wisdom, and really when we understand them and even nature in itself, there's just so much that we can learn from just their way of being. And we'll explore more about that today. But first of all, I would love for you to expand a bit on what is it exactly what you're talking about when you're talking about healing with horses and this work, which is often referred to as equine therapy. So for those of us that are just completely new to this, what exactly is it, and what does a session typically involve?
Yes, so people do, I think, probably first got introduced to equine therapy with knowing about soldiers with PTSD. That some people know that they've heard of it in that way, or perhaps children on the spectrum with autism using horses as part of their healing modality. But what's really exciting in the last how much in the last 4 or 5 years it's starting to grow as a modality that is accessible to anybody, that there's no one that couldn't get something from a session with horses. It's just that we don't know yet. As a consumer, I'll look up healing with horses or equine therapy. It's not in the consciousness yet, but it's becoming more and more so, especially for the likes of anxiety, depression, grief. And also when we've done talking therapy to death, that's got a great place in life, talking therapy, but this work is so much about the body, the heart. They are so embodied, these beings, and they can teach us so much. So equine therapy, you'll find many practitioners if you do a search all over different locations. I'm what's called trained in equine assisted learning, which means I work with, I'm not a qualified therapist, as in a psychotherapist or psychologist, but I am trained to work with horses in helping people. So if you see the words EAL, which that's what I am, or EAP means you're a psychotherapist, or so that's the traditional equine therapy. And you can find practitioners that just, there's so many ways to resonate of the different flavors, like with any modality, of who resonates with who you are or your location. And so my work is very much set in the paddock. People arrive, and when it's cold, so at the moment winter, we sit around a fire and have a cup of tea, and the horses are loosely grazing around us. So I love to work with the horses free, at liberty it's called, so they can choose as well who wants to turn up, who doesn't. The energy that is with the person who's turning up, it all unfolds organically. And so we just drop in. Horses are so embodied. They're 100% in the body in every moment. And what are we? We're just like this mess in our heads. So we take some time to drop in, find out what's alive for the person. The more and more I've done this, it's 5 years now, the less and less I have any idea or pretense or thought of how a session might go. We just allow and turn up and let the magic unfold. When I first started, I'd been in the healing world, so I'm used to holding the space in the treatment room and kind of controlling where it's going to go. But if I did that in this work, I'd miss the horse's magic. So I had to really learn to notice and stay aware and stay present to the messaging that they're communicating, and missed it so many times. Still do sometimes, like, I missed what they were, really staying present to the energy of what is there we are part of the herd when we're with them, whoever I'm, whether it's an individual, a small group, or a bigger group. And we learn so much from the herd dynamics. So once someone's dropped in, we may do a visual, depending what's alive from them. The most common thing is people sit down and they cry within 5 or 10 minutes. And they're going, I don't know what's going on with me. I can't believe I'm doing this. And the horse's energy, their heart space is so enormous. Their energy field is enormous. Like, I once had a practitioner show me, he walked up the paddock. He said, can you feel where this horse's energy stops? I'm like, no. And he took off and he went, oh no, 150 meters. And he said, like a circumference, one horse. So when you're coming into a group of horses, a herd, we're in this amplified healing space. So that's helping just whatever's under. Just that we're, it just starts to move. And that's magnificent, because we're finding some relief, from freedom from the thing that's causing disturbance. And so tears are really common and honoured. In fact, the horses are more comfortable with authentic emotion than when we put on that mask. That energy to them is like, oh, like, what the hell is that? Because we're trying to be something we're not. And that's the most confusing, discombobulating energy for animals in general. They're much more comfortable. We're in full unravel. We could be howling, snot, dribbling, and they're like, is that all? I think there might be a bit more there, or through their eyes, or through their nodding, or through their presence, or their ability to hold that at our most vulnerable.
Wow.
So I work
so beautiful.
A lot with shame and guilt, and a lot with people. Like I say, have you got anything that you've never shared with anybody on earth? Are you carrying anything that has never been spoken? Use that time with the horses to share, to ask for help, to voice it. The change it makes in ourselves, that we're not carrying it alone, and we can begin that relief and release, is profound. And the way that then people observe how the horses can be with them through that vulnerability, without judgment, without like what we get so frightened of the human, and our human woundings is why we will often not share. The way that they can hold that. And then if someone's really vulnerable and really kind of triggered, and the horses feel too big, my dogs will come in at that perfect time, and they'll just lay down on their back. and then someone can, cuddle them and stroke them, and they soothe the vulnerability.
Wow, that's just so beautiful. I can feel that so deeply, and what I'm understanding, it's really about just the energetics of their heart space and what that's transmitting to us, just being in their field, their energy. And that's where the magic occurs. That's the healing. And I love how organic it is as well. It's very, as you were mentioning in the beginning, like this work is so feminine. That's what I'm getting. Like, it's just so raw. And there's, like you said, you can't put your mask on with the horses. Like, they see right through it. It's a completely embodied experience. And I think it's so needed on the planet right now, that authentic, genuine connections, and just that exchange where you're just being seen in your truth and in your rawness, even if it looks ugly, well, what we consider ugly, the snot, tears, whatever. But there's no judgment there by the horses. So that's just so beautiful. And thank you for sharing that. And so who do you think, you did mention like it can sometimes be typically pitched at people with PTSD, or maybe someone with autism or what have you, but who do you think, like particularly with the work that you do, who are the type of people that are typically drawn to you? Maybe someone's listening to this and thinking, well, I don't know if I have anything that needs to be healed. I mean, I'm sure we all do, but maybe they're not aware of it. Would you still encourage someone who maybe doesn't think that they have enough, I don't know, traumas or whatever to be healed, to go to an event like this and to do this type of work with the horses?
My answer to that is, who doesn't need this right now? Like, on earth, it is intense. So who has a nervous system at the moment that's just sweet and not needing, like, if they do, I'd love them to send me an email and tell me their magic. Like, it is intense right now. So who doesn't need practices and nature and things to support us to find our center, to keep ourselves on track? So absolutely not. Like, I will have, a lot of my clients will come as a group of a couple of friends or 2 or 3 friends, and or it can be a surprise birthday gift, or so it doesn't even have to have a therapeutic element, but the organicness of what arrives is medicine, regardless. But in saying that, I would say the most common dynamic that is coming to me is probably people seeking empowerment, either to change something within themselves or their life, or support, or it's kind of like coaching. I'm just finishing my certification to be a spiritual life coach. So that's all woven into the work as well. So it's available to anybody, and there's not much medicine when we sit outside with animals in nature, our feet on the earth. Often we'll be on the ground. I really get people to lay on the ground a lot and touch the ground, and I've just realized myself how important that is these last few years, to just lay on the ground. I feel like often I'm taking a drug. The energy's so fast and I feel scattered, but if I lay on the ground and put my hands down and breathe consciously for a few minutes, it's just like, oh, there I am. Oh, even my daughter will say to me, Mum, I think you need to go outside and lay on the ground. Like, yeah. Or my husband used to say, I think you need to go with the horses. Like, yeah, you're right, I do. So we need these medicines built into our everyday, of what nature, and whether it's our dog or our cat or our pets, that's our medicine. It's the same, but there's coming to things for more structure. So I love to create events with focus. So I've done a feminine rising, know thyself, nourish the inner child, collaborating with other practitioners, sound healers, yoga teachers. So I just kind of get inspiration and then just put something out. And some things take off amazing. Some things I work really intensely on, just go, I just go with it. And the people will be drawn to the ones that resonate.
Yeah, totally. And you mentioned there just about the inner child healing. So I'm curious about that. How can horses help healing the inner child?
That was one of my dear friends is a psychotherapist, and she's amazing at the inner child work. And one day, not long ago, we were just on the couch as friends. Actually, we're having tears. We're in tears and of our own, life. And like, oh my gosh, we really should do a workshop on this. And literally over 10 minutes, we just created the day outline of marrying the ability of horses to help us drop into our own being and to really consolidate that safety within ourselves. So we spent time with the horses. People met all of the horses individually. They may have connected with a particular horse, and the qualities of that horse may have been so reassuring, or whatever the word was that they needed for their inner child, because some need confidence or some need tenderness. And so depending on the energy as they move freely around the horses, the energy takes care of who you want to stand near, what they're evoking, what they have. And one of the horses that I work with, Clover, she's an 18-hand Clydesdale. She is a baby elephant. She is the hugest being with the energy of like a Labrador puppy as her essence in this body. So you can kind of see her try and need to, how she's got to move this enormous being, how big it is. So she's incredible. Like when people are really, say they had to speak or go, or say a literal child was coming for a session, they've got to go do a presentation at school, or an adult that's terrified to speak. Well, what if in a visualization they could drop in before that moment, connect with Clover, imagine climbing on Clover's back and arriving at school or at the presentation on this ginormous being of support. Notice how the shoulders will feel, and the chest, and the smile, and so that's how we can work with their energies. And so in that workshop, we after lunch dive deep into sharing some inner child woundings, and we use EFT tapping under the guidance of Teresa, the psychotherapist, to guide us through tapping. And we tapped as a group on everybody's individual things that were shared. And it was so powerful. People were so in their hearts, so connected. So the combination was really beautiful.
Thank you for sharing that. That sounds like an amazing event. Very powerful. And do you think that this kind of healing or transformation is possible with other animals, or do you think there is just something so special about horses in particular?
I 100% believe it's with other animals, and but I also know the magnified power of the horse's heart field is enormous, but that other animals aren't to be negated. So, for example, on my next property to where I work from, the cows are always at the fence line. They want to come. They want to come and they want to be part of it. It's like, what's going on over there? That just feels, I want that. I had a healing with a holistic vet that once came to the property, and he was a vet that you call out for your animal, but the animals were always a vehicle for the human to heal. So he kind of healed me, even though the horse had hurt its leg. So he basically did an energy healing with me in the paddock. We lived on 20 acres at the time. And as he was doing this kind of somatic healing of moving things out of my body, every animal on the 20 acres that had an ability to cut through fences was within a couple of meter circle.
Wow.
The sheep were there, the chickens had come, the dogs were there, the horses were there. It was everything wanted to be a part of that energy. So there's an organisation called Animal Assisted Therapies Australia, and as a resource you can click on there by state and see what therapies are. I've seen people are doing yoga with chickens around. It's all possible. And I got a very strong teaching in this many years ago. I was hosting an animal communication course at my property, and we got given a picture of an animal, and I wanted a horse or a dog or an elephant, things that I love. I got a rat to tune in with. I thought, oh God, a rat. I don't like rats or mice. Wow, did I get my backside kicked when I tuned in to the energy of rat, of like, how dare you negate our role in the collective? We all have a divine mission, a divine role. It's the symbiosis of the whole. How arrogant are you to think that? I was like, oh. So I really believe firsthand everything has a consciousness, and we bring that especially in the paddock as well. And notice when we're in a process with someone and there might be something going on, or when the bird will come through, or when the eagle will present, or when the fox comes past, or the kangaroo or the dog, that's not random. Even the weather, I'm learning more and more with the shamanic aspect. When the sun breaks through, or the smoke comes, and just at that moment to cleanse a big energy, or a light rain that would usually be disturbing has a purification energy behind it for that person or those people. So it's all deeply connected. We just have different messengers. And so now when I get a visit from any being, I'll Google, if I not have one of my books, what's the energy of butterfly or bee, or because I think there's messages that when we're open, there's a lot of wisdom.
Oh, I actually do the same. Every time I see animals, I look up like, what's the medicine of this animal? So I love doing that. And I definitely resonate with so much of what you're saying. I do believe everything has a consciousness. And yeah, it's really interesting for anyone who's listening to this to start seeing animals as our teachers. And yeah, there's so many sites online where you can just quickly look up, like, what does this animal mean? And I always use my intuition to kind of take what I will from that description, what resonates with me, and I take what I need from that. So thank you for sharing that. I did want to ask you if you had any stories that were really just amazing with the work that you do, either for yourself or any of your clients, that you could share with our listeners.
I have so many. Like, I really believe I sit in the land of miracles and transformations. And I, every week, and that's not exaggerating, I am in awe of an unfolding that occurs in sessions with the magic and the majesty of what the horses can really do. So a recent one was really good. There's so many, actually. This is a really good recent. This is a whole thing when we're talking about goddess energy and knowing yourself, and so I can weave a lot into this story to answer that question. So I was going to run an event And I had too much going on in my personal life, and I felt like this was not the right time for me. It was like it was going to be one of my know thyself. So it's a really, you want to be turning up good for this. Anyway, I wasn't in a good place. The numbers were quite low, and I really knew I could push my old self. I could push and make it happen, because that's what I said I was going to do, and stay it and drive it. Or I can cancel. I think I'll cancel, and I'll offer that I can do some private sessions on the day that the retreat was going to be. So whoever wants to take up a private, they might be able to do a private, or I could do it a small group. Firstly, I honored myself.
Mm-hmm.
I honored what I needed, which is a major milestone of when you're in your own creation of making your own business too, not that dance between push and allow and make things happen and not. And so that was I felt it was a big deal for me to really honor and just let it go. So 2 people took up the invitation of that they would like private sessions on the day. And that felt really manageable to my energy. So the first one was a regular client, and she'd been many, many times. And she sat down and she said, I've really decided the horses are my medicine. And she's wanting to get into working with animals as a livelihood. And she said, they are just my thing. And she said, each night I go to sleep, I imagine that Clover, the horse we were just talking about, the big horse, that I'm cuddled up in her arms while she's on the ground, or her legs, and I'm cocooned around her as I go off to sleep in the night. That was how our session started, which was beautiful. Had a very rich session, a lot of profound moments, a lot of that letting go of many things that she'd been holding. And she finished the session and she said, this has been so powerful. Next week, I'm going to get a tattoo of a horse on my wrist to remind me of the power of horse in my world. Like, that is beautiful. That is beautiful. The session finished, and what unfolded is that lady became the owner of the Clydesdale horse Clover.
What?
Because I didn't own her. I just am a caretaker, and her owner wanted to sell her, and she was very expensive, and I wasn't going to be able to buy her. So I told my client this story, and all of these miracles unfolded, that she had a friend say to her, because she was telling her that how devastating that this horse that's been so powerful for her and is doing such healing work on, and this horse family, this herd, will be split up because this horse is going to be sold. And the friend that she told at lunch said, I'll buy her. I'll buy her. You pay me back. And she gets to live where she is, doing the work that she continues to do.
Oh my God, that is so beautiful.
So this is that unfolded there. So that's enough beautiful, amazing things. So the afternoon session. But we obviously, that took a few days to get to the purchase, but that all began to unravel from that session. The second session never met the lady. She was devastated that retreat was not going to be on, and I felt really guilty because she was so excited. She'd carved off her day. She'd been journaling leading up, and she'd had people look, and it's like, so that part of me was like, oh, I really shouldn't have cancelled. Anyway, we had a powerful session, rich, really rich, because she's done so much talking therapy and the embodiment. And one of the horses lady just came over and walked up to her after a little bit of a chat, and they were off, as in the connection between them, the similarities of their life stories, the heart connection. She was open. So we did the session, and it was summertime still then, not summer, but nicer weather. And I finished, when the weather's nice, I take my massage table out into the paddock and I offer people to work on their body while the horses are around. So I'd love to work reflexology or Reiki or just sometimes head points. So she sat up from the table after that, the horses all around, and she says, that session was so powerful. I'm going to get a tattoo of a horse. And this time she says, on my right wrist.
Oh my gosh.
To remind me of the power of horse, so I can remember what they have taught me today. I bow down. The perfection through that entire of unfolding, of living into your alignment, honoring your truth, being of service to how it feels good to you in the moment. None of those things, I believe, would have happened if I'd pushed through and did the group event, because we wouldn't have had the intimacy and the depth that what unfolded under each session. And then so the two imagery of this lady saying her left wrist, the tattoo, and this lady saying, like, there's a consciousness swirling around to drop in, so that imagery to me is almost like the yin yang of the two.
That's what I was thinking, the left and the right.
Right, it's almost like the two heads on the left, like, so the symbology of that is like, I just bow my head down to the greater goddess, the greater universe, the greater spirit that weaves through us all. And the faith,
magic,
the faith from that day has just imbued my life when I've had some challenges of just the divine plan. Get ourselves out of the road. Stay attuned to what we need, and stay present and allow, So that was a really beautiful recent story. I get told a lot that people call on the horses in need. So when they've met them and then they are challenged, and what I know is the horses turn up for them in hospitals, in MRIs, in panic attacks. They are there. They feel them. I don't know how it works. I do know a little bit. No is not the right word. So there's a bit of a longer story, but January last year, I knew I wanted to write more in my life. So I decided to write. I gave myself a Kundalini yoga practice, which is when we want to strengthen something in our life, we give ourselves a 40-day practice. And I gave myself a 40-day practice to write for 30 minutes a day to strengthen that muscle of committing to write. And on day 7 or day 8, I was guided just intuitively to go out to the paddock. So I took my journal out there, and horse consciousness just started landing into my journal. Like, what? So that it was coming from the horse's consciousness through my pen, channeling it through. And they said, thank you for being the 5th horse at Heart of the Horse, because at that stage I had 4 horses. Well, what's happened from that time is they have gifted me with so many words now to explain what happens. So when I say I don't know what happens, what they would say to me, what they said to me and I share, is they can access all dimensions and bring back to what the person in front of them needs.
Wow.
So they're not location based. That's so 3D. They tell me, and this is written about a lot, they're a bridge to the other world.
Wow.
So they will bring through, or not they will bring through, but they will create an energy presence that allows loved ones to make themselves known to people. I've had many clients say that angels, they've literally seen angels on horses' back, and they describe, like, I don't see these things. It's like, can you tell me? Like, tell me what you see. And it's happened so many times. Like, I have a lot of faith. I don't need to see. I feel it. But when people can describe, it was beautiful after Boomer passed, how many people just told me how much he was around still. And a lot of kids who didn't even know anything about this, like, oh, Boomer's still here. He's with a white horse. He's always with a white horse when people see him. So it's someone in spirit world that he's with. I have a bell tent on the property and do a lot of work when I'm doing our group things and yoga classes there. And he's very present in the work, in the sacred space that's held there. I have a client with a lot of anxiety, and they've helped her enormously. And she draws, so she sent me some beautiful pictures of the herd at different time. And anyway, she was doing a picture after Boomer had passed, and of her with her, she's an older lady, and she so beautiful. Her and the horse just were third eye to third eye, just in the paddock. And so she was drawing this. She wanted to create art from it, and she was creating the art. And then Boomer pipes in, "Where am I going?" And she was like, "You weren't actually going to be in the picture." He's like, "Well, I'd like to be." He'd passed maybe 9 months, when this happened. And so she created a little space for him to turn up in the picture. And then she had the imagery of being in chains, and then the expansion of her heart opening from the gift of what the horses had gifted her. And she's 80.
Wow.
So the youngest client is 6, the oldest is 84.
Wow.
And everyone in between. So
Oh, it just sounds so magical, this work. I am so excited to go to one of your events. I cannot wait. And I'm sure everyone listening to this is sold and they're like, where do I sign up? I do have a couple more questions for you. So, you are on the Thank Goddess podcast, and we are really passionate here about exploring all things divine feminine and the goddess. And it's so funny because, even just how you're telling me about these like synchronicities, like something happened with you as well when you reached out to me for this interview, and I realized, hang on a minute, I already follow this woman on Instagram. So we were already connected before we even agreed to do this interview. And then what's so funny is that night I opened up my book and I was reading at the time If Women Rose Rooted by Sharon Blackie. It's really good for anyone who wants to explore more of the feminine. And that book's not even about horses. And I just opened up to the middle of the chapter where I was reading, and I started reading about the healing medicine of horses. Like, of all days, the day that I connected with you, which just goes to show, like, even I haven't even attended one of these events, but I can already feel the magic of the horses and how it's connected us. And I wanted to just read a few sentences from that book that really stood out to me, and how they explained the relationship between the feminine and horses, which I really, really loved. And it said that horses relate to the world in ways which traditionally and archetypally are associated with the feminine. So choosing cooperation over competition, responsiveness over strategy, emotion and intuition over logic, process over goal, and the creative approach to life that those qualities engender. And I just really wanted to hear your thoughts on it, because I know that you talk a lot about the feminine and how you see horses associated with the divine feminine and the goddess.
Yeah, I think in history, the horse is all about, if you dream of the horse, it's always about empowerment and personal power. And I really believe they facilitate that in I can't even describe. These are the most common words people say from this work, is I don't know how to put into words what's happened today. Like if I try and say this, the words are too gross for the subtlety. So it's really hard to name the energetics of what happens. But I suppose I would say to anyone, trust the calling. If you are dreaming of horses, if you are being always wanted to be with horses and never had an opportunity to be, don't negate that. Find ways to bring them into your world. There's a reason to that. Amazing if you need assistance on your healing journey. But if it's joy, if it's a passion, if you just wished when you were 9 that you could have had that dream met, make it come true at 50. Be with them in the world. And the problem has been so far, and I have so many people like this, is they want to be with the horses. They don't necessarily want to ride them. And so the vehicle that we've had up until now is, if you wanted to do anything with horses, you've got to go to have riding lessons or go to. And now there's more and more gentler ways that people are drawn to. I'm not judging that. I love to ride my horses. Some people don't in this work. They don't believe in riding horses. I know the absolute joy with being in the forest on my horse with my dog and my chai in my backpack. And if my daughter comes with me and her horse, the feeling these beings are having together, I have no problem being on their back. In fact, it feels to me like Avatar. You know, when in Avatar, where they connecting with the tail to those, like that's what, when you are in connection and you are noticing the other. Now, there's a lot of riding that is disgusting and wants to control, and then they're missing the magic of this animal, and they're a beast that are there to perform. Of course, I do not condone that. But when you are in connection and conversation and noticing each other, when they're happy, when they're not, how we can make each other feel safe, that is utter bliss. And I think that, you know, a lot of people want that bliss, but they don't want to be on their back. And now with this opening up of these experiences, people can have them without needing to have anything to do with riding. In fact, I dropped my ridden component of my work because my insurance changed a few years ago, and I was very worried, like, how will I do this work without having people on the horse's back? And I now could go and get insurance, but I choose not to, because it's got more and more subtle and less gross. So when it was ridden and people, you know, saddling and getting on and being ridden, we're in the doing, not the being. And like when you said the words before we spoke at the beginning, it's the gold. This is my words, is the gold is in when we stop and we are still and we notice them breathing with us, and their eye is looking so deep into our soul. If we're in doing mode, we're missing those. So now most of my work is so slow and still, and taking a chair and people being comfortable, sitting on a log or sitting near them, laying down, observing from a distance. That's where the magic is. And it's like the horses are so willing, they will let us ride them or put them in a horse float or jump them, but when we get still with them, it's like, hey, human, I can probably help you out a little bit if you're receptive. And that's our feminine energy. It's being receptive. Whereas in traditional horse, you know, when I grew up, if a horse doesn't do what you want, you can't let them get the better of you. You push them, you hit them, make them do it your way. You've got to be the boss. Oh my gosh. You know, so I've fallen off so many times in my life. Wasn't reading the signs, pushing through. You know, now when they're not happy with something, we just pause, we back off, as in go away from the distress, let them integrate it, let them lick and chew, like, oh, that feels better. And then we'll walk on. Whereas once upon a time, I was like, no, you've got to hit your horse and you've got to make him do what you want when you want. And that's the teachings that was come through all of the traditional horse. That horse has got the better of you. Go do it when you want to.
Thank you for
masculine,
sharing that.
That's the masculine approach versus the feminine. Now, don't get me wrong. When it's feeding time, I will have my big long lunge whip out to hold some space from my big Clydesdale, who is like a popcorn when her food's coming. And I do not want 18 hands, 1,000 tons, 1,000 kilograms of popcorn in my energy field. So I will use my whip to create space, never to hit, but to my little arms into her mean nothing. So I want a nice big space around me for my safety. So we can't go too far the other way. And we see this all the time in parenting. It's like we don't want to put the boundaries and we're just so soft and it's all just so wishy-washy. That kids are so confused with that. So we need, it's the balance between the feminine and the masculine approach.
Yeah, beautiful. I can see how this, you're using the example of the horses, but how this applies to so many areas of our lives. Like it's so interesting how, it applies to everything.
And that's so much a part. I often say ancient horse wisdom for modern lives, because this work, we don't have a lovely couple of hours in the paddock and then you leave and you never think of it again. Everything we do is relevant and woven into our lives. They're master teachers. They're master teachers.
Oh, amazing. And my final question for you, this has been so interesting. I've loved speaking to you. My final question, which I ask all my guests, is so you are on the Thank Goddess podcast, and this podcast is really about awakening goddess consciousness within ourselves and within the collective, within the planet at the moment. And so when I speak about goddess consciousness, I basically explain it as leading from the heart, being in authenticity and connecting to your truth and letting that shine out into the world. And so my final question to you is, when do you feel most aligned with goddess consciousness? When do you feel most aligned with the goddess? What are you doing? Who are you with? What does it look like?
I feel like when I'm most aligned and connected within myself, that energy then goes into whatever I'm doing. So for me, the power of having a daily practice to be with and tune into myself and get the alignment within myself is such a priority. And then that infuses the rest of my day, whether it's a little gentle moment with a stranger that's just needs to happen, that's perfect, whether it's turning up in my relationships or with clients, with self. And by being present and in tune with self, then we can adjust to know what we need. And by doing that, I think that's how we raise the consciousness on the planet. It's one little light bulb at a time, being in alignment. And I love that visual as each of us come online and honor ourselves. We're all here to be of service in our different ways, but not to negate that old way of negating self to be of service. It's outdated. So it's about how do we honor self, and then how do we best turn up. And so I love to approach my life that energy flows into everything that I do. And sometimes it looks really goddamn mucky as well. I think, we've got to honor the dark and the shadow, and at times we need to go there and we can't bypass because it's awful. And we've got to do that deep work. But the more that we can hold that within ourselves and our wholeness, and I know in the healing work, the more that we are comfortable to be assisting others because we know those places, so we can not panic or not be frightened of being with others to help them in that time. And so I think that dark, that subconscious stuff doesn't own us, doesn't control us when we're brave to embody our whole self. And for me, that takes an amazing network of people for me to be who I am. I like to just share all the time that have a circle around you, great practitioners, healers, mentors. I have so many mentors, like this amazing circle of women, predominantly some men. I might not see someone for 5 years, but I know when I need their medicine. And so I don't do it alone, especially through the big stuff. I can maintain and do, through daily practices, the things that help, and the food choices and the lifestyle things. But the big stuff, we're not here to do that alone. We need someone to hold us, to witness us, to bring that, birthing that next part. So having that sense of a collective around you, and the power of a women's group or a moon circle, or to be with each other in that way through, I've got a moon group. We meet on the full moon every month, and to go journeying through the joys, the pain, the successes, the failures, to see it all just gives such confirmation of this journey that we aren't doing it alone, but we do often feel like we are in our darkest times.
Mm-hmm.
So goddess energies, embodying self and being authentic in who you are, and that can be what it is. It doesn't have to be beautiful and peaceful, and like we're undoing all that shit too.
Mm-hmm.
We of what the feminine looks like, and she can roar,
Mm-hmm.
she can put down big boundaries, she can say enough. She needs all of those, and the horses are amazing teachers of boundaries and getting your needs met, and saying you want more space, and you're in my energy field, and give me their teachings on that level are next.
Wow. Oh, there's just so much. Oh, thank you so much for sharing all your wisdom. This has been amazing. I've learned so much, and I'm sure my listeners will have learned so much as well. So where can people find you if anyone's listening to this and they want to come to one of your events or work with you? What's the best place for them to find you?
I think at the moment, Heart of the Horse on Instagram is where I'm most active, and I put most things up there. But my Heart of the Horse website has a subscription element. I don't send many, so don't worry, maybe 1 or 2 a year. But anything when I'm doing a lot of events, I'll usually send an email and it'll go on Instagram. And I'm so excited. All of these incarnations of different modalities and businesses, I am about to merge everything. This is my thing over the next few months, to bring it all into one place. So I can put horse events, yoga events, meditation events, collaborations. But at the moment I have Facebook pages for yoga and Facebook for horses and emails, and everything's just doula work from clients. It's just about to all come into one. Mm-hmm. And I think that's going to be Elevate with Rachel Jane. I think that amazing. Is my new offering, to put it all under one, but it's in the works.
Okay. All right. So stay tuned, everybody. And I will include all your details in the show notes. So if anyone wants to work with Rachel, you'll be able to find all her details there. Thank you, Rachel. This has been amazing. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
And Dani, thank you. I think this topic, this presence, this conversation, this planting seeds, this is what this is, of just bringing so many possibilities that people may not know of, and that's spreading some magic around. So thank you for what you're doing, and I'll keep listening. I've just sent your last episode to my daughter, and I'd love to share it with my I'll share this episode with my Instagram account, so people can hopefully jump on board as well.
Thank you so much.
So good.